Hi, today I'm going to read The Queen's Castle at Windsor, written by Elizabeth Newberry. It's a guide about the monarchs and the Windsor Castle. Welcome to Windsor Castle, the oldest and largest castle in the world. It's been lived in ever since it was built 900 years ago. Wow, that's a long time. Windsor was Queen Elizabeth's childhood home, and now as a great grandmother she still spends many weekends here. So since this book was printed before the Queen Elizabeth II died, the book still referred is The Queen at the Royal Windsor Horse Show, which takes place every year in the grounds of Windsor Castle, a royal fortress. William the Conqueror reigned from 1066 to 1087, built Windsor Castle after he conquered England at the Battle of Hastings in 1066. It was one of the fortresses he built to keep the English under control, bigger and better. The first castle was Moat and Bailey, which was a wooden keep on top of a mound of earth. The moat, with the courtyard below. The bailey had surrounded by massive barricades and deep ditches. Moat and bailey castles were simply structures but difficult to attack and easily defended with very few soldiers. About 100 years later, Henry II reigned from 1154 to 1189, made the castle larger and rebuilt it in stone. This is the castle. Besieged. When King John reigned from 1099 to 1216, fell out with his powerful barons, they besieged Windsor Castle in 1216. The castle probably looked like this. This escape route, called Sally Port, led to the castle's ditch. Defenders could use it to dash out to get help or to make surprise raids on attackers. This is what they're talking about. Did you know Windsor Castle has only ever been attacked 3 times and never captured? Defending Windsor Castle. Royal castles are protected around the clock. William the Conqueror's soldiers guarded the first castle, and later in the Middle Ages, knights and men at arms defended it. Today, the household troops keep watch. Deadly weapons. In the Middle Ages, men armed with long bows fired through arrows, loops, and gaps in the battlements called crenelles, which protected them from enemy fire. Crossbowmen were positioned at important points like snipers. Longbows could shoot further and faster, with crossbows were more deadly. A soldier aims his crossbow stand. Defenders could drop boulders or boiling water through murder holes on to attackers below. Here, from here. Yeoman of the Guard. The first Tudor king, Henry VII, reigned from 1485 to 1509. Suspected that people were plotting against him. They were, so he created the Yeoman of the Guard. Their job was to control everyone who approached the king. Today, the Yeoman of Guard still act as a queen's bodyguard, or now in present time, king's bodyguard, and continue to wear Tudor style uniform. The household troops. The splendid guards on duty at Windsor Castle today are part of household troops. At the end of their shift, they hand over to new troops. This ceremony is called changing of the guard. Over to you. The guards are trained to stand still for 2 hours. How long can you stand like that? They don't move for 2 hours, constantly stand straight. Magnificent Knights. Edward III reigned from 1327 to 1377. Was born in Windsor Castle in 1312 and became the king when he was a teenager. Tall and handsome with red gold hair, Edward was warrior king. He spent millions in today's money transferring the old fortress into royal palace. Knights of the Garter. In 1348, Edward created 26 Knights of the Garter, including himself and his son, known as the Black Prince, inspired by the legend King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. These young and courageous Garter Knights obeyed strict rules. Means very tough rules of bravery, loyalty, and honor, called chivalry. Edward's 6-foot long sword. Look at this. Edward's chose St. George to guard over his knights. Team spirit. Edward's newly rebuilt palace provided a splendid place for great feasts and joust, mock fights and horsebacks. Jousts were like football matches today with team colors, noisy chants and even managers. Secret signs. Knights could be badly wounded or killed in jousts, so competitors wore armor to protect themselves as they were invisible behind their helmets. Signs were painted on shields and banners so they could be easily identified from a distance. The three lions still appears in England's football kit. Oh wow, this. Let's show everyone. Practicing for battle, knights charged at each other and tried to score a strike with a long pointed pole called a lance. This is a lance, which was designed to break when it hit an opponent. A shattered lance proved a direct hit. It was good practice for battles. Come on, the Reds! Edward III shields. This is the Edward III shield. Okay, next, let's see. It's getting interesting. Beast and feast. Hunting was the top sport of kings and queens, so Windsor Castle was built close to the forest where plenty of deer and wild boar roamed. Forest law said that only royalty and invited nobles could hunt there. Cruel punishments were handed out to anyone caught breaking the law. Roast boar and yield hum. A hunting will go on. Many kings and queens hunted as often as they could. Henry VIII reigned from 1509 to 1547, who was a great sportsman when he was young. Hunted every day except on holy days. His first two wives, Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn, often accompanied him. Henry's daughter, Prince Elizabeth, later Elizabeth I, reigned 1558 to 1603, loved to chase too. Meat for the kitchens. Hunt provided venison or deer and boar to feed the hundreds of people who worked or lived in the castle. Meat wasn't eaten on Fridays, some Wednesdays, and during Lent for religious reason. The court ate plenty of fish too, which came from the river markets and castle ponds. The castle's kitchens were built by Edward III more than 600 years ago. Wow. They are still in use today. What? State banquets. Kings and queens love to show off their wealth and power by putting on great feasts. Today, banquets are still part of the state visit made by very important people such as rulers of the countries. The queen personally inspects the menu and the table after it is laid. Nowadays, king will do that. Births, deaths and marriages. During Windsor Castle 900-year history, many members of the royal family have been born here. Some have been married in St. George Chapel, and 10 kings and queens' grandmother and mothers who are buried here too. Henry VIII is buried alongside his favorite wife, St. George Chapel. She died after giving birth to his son, Edward. Edward VI, reigned 1547-53. Who was she? Jane Seymour. Royal weddings. Many royal marriages have taken place in St. George Chapel. Yes. He is son of King Charles, the present king of UK and the Commonwealth countries. In 1365, Edward III daughter Isabella married a French nobleman, Engard de Concy. The king spent huge sums on jewels and silver. In 2018, on beautiful sunny day, Prince Harry married Meghan Markle. After their wedding, Prince Harry and Meghan rode through Windsor town in an open carriage so that as many well-wishers as possible could see them and join in the celebrations. Later past year, they also travelled through the town, but this time in the closed carriage to protect them from the weather. Hooray! Good luck! She looks lovely. Okay, so the next chapter is Thrown in the Prison. Medieval castles were often used to hold prisoners. Rebels could be left in dungeons to rot, but some foreign kings and nobles lived there in great comfort. In the Middle Ages, kings and nobles were sometimes captured in battle and kept prisoners until vast sums of money called ransoms were paid for their release. During Edward III's reign, King David II of Scotland and King John of France were held at Windsor Castle. They were both treated well, and even when hunting with Edward. The Civil War. When Charles I was king, who reigned 1625 to 1649, he fell out with Parliament, and finally in 1642 a civil war was declared between the king, whose supporters were called Royalists or Cavaliers, and Parliament led by Oliver Cromwell, whose supporters were called Roundheads. Windsor Castle became a base for parliamentarians and high-ranking royalist soldiers. High-ranking soldiers were imprisoned here in comfortable conditions, but lower-ranking prisoners were thrown into stinking dungeons and fed on moldy bread and water. Did you know the poor knights fought for King Edward III in France? They were captured and had to sell their land to pay the ransom, so the king allowed them to live in Windsor Castle. Today, the military knights, as they are now known, are retired army officers and still live in houses opposite St. George Chapel. Beheaded. In 1649, Charles I was condemned to death. The king spent his Christmas at the castle before being taken to London and executed. His body was brought back to Windsor and buried in St. George Chapel with his head reattached to his body. Money for food. In 1700s, there was a debtors' presence where people who owed money above the King Henry VIII gate, prisoners had to pay for their own food, so they dangled baskets out of their cell windows to beg for money. Spare any change. Look at this. Priceless. Every king and queen for last 500 years has added to the treasure at Windsor Castle. Now it is one of the world's greatest collection of paintings, books, china, silver, and furniture. Psst, the king was only 5 feet tall. What? He is even shorter than me. Sir Anthony Van Dyck painted flattering portraits of rich and famous people. This enormous picture, painted in 1633, shows Charles I in armor as a magnificent white horse entering through an arch in triumph. Did you know Charles I loved Italian paintings? George IV admired Dutch paintings, and Queen Victoria adored paintings with animals, and they all liked artists who made them look good. Sold off. Look, the shortest king. Sold off. Once the Civil War was over, Oliver Cromwell, Lord Protector from 1653 to 1658, ordered a lot of royal treasure, including Charles I collection of 1500 paintings and 500 sculptures, to be sold off. After Cromwell died, Charles I's eldest son and heir Prince Charles returned from exile in France and was crowned Charles II. By this time, the castle was looking very shabby, as it has not been cared for during Cromwell's rule. Loving luxury, Charles II reigned from 1660 to 1685, who had grown used to French luxuries, appointed the best architect, craftspeople, and artists to redecorate Windsor Castle in a very fashionable and highly decorated style called Baroque. Beauty and splendor made him look awesome. Over to you. Can you spot Sagan Antony, the king's French riding master? The silk curtain. Van Dyck loved painting rich fabric. I think it's this one. The silver mirror belonged to Charles II. Charles II set about getting back all the treasures that had been sold off. Coronation spoon is the oldest of the crown jewels. It was sold in 1649 but returned to the time of Charles II coronation ceremony. Devastation. Windsor Castle was attacked in 1216, and during the Second World War it was in danger of being bombed. But one of the biggest disasters in its history was the terrible fire of November 1992. The fire started in a private chapel and raced through the oldest timber roof with the frightening speed. By the time fire engines had arrived, the northeast corner of the castle was burning fiercely. All the firefighters could do was to stop the flames spreading further. 39 fire engines sped into the castle. 250 firefighters fought to control the blaze. That's so many. Do you know? A 2-ton urn was too heavy to move. It was filled with water as firefighters hosed the room, and all the pieces of the semi-precious stone which covered its surface popped off. Ha 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 ha. in ruins. Let's show it off. Everyone in the castle formed a human chain to rescue priceless work of art. Incredibly, very few were destroyed, but 115 rooms were gutted and fire caused many millions of pounds worth of damage. The roof of St. George House was badly damaged. This is the damage happened. Nitin, do you know we have been at this place? Yes. You also went there with us.
When I was 5 years old.
Yes, repairing the damage, restoring everything to its former glory involved carpenters, upholsters, painters, guilders, and many more craftspeople. It took 5 years to complete and afterwards the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh held a party for everyone who had helped. Power and glory. George III was crowned king in 1760 and ruled for 60 years. During much of that time, Britain was at war with France, then most powerful country in Europe. Heroes and villains. Napoleon Bonaparte, an outstanding and ambitious general in the French army, wanted to rule all of the Europe, including Britain. Admiral Lord Nelson was one of the Britain's greatest and naval commanders who won the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805, defeating Napoleon navies in at sea. Do you know Sir Admiral Nelson's statue is at Trafalgar Square as well as in Birmingham? We saw it. In 1815, the Duke of Wellington, a brilliant general in British Army, defeated Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo. Yes. George IV reigned from 1820 to 1830, built a Waterloo chamber, celebrate victory over Napoleon. It's decorated with portraits of all the European leaders who had helped to defeat the French. I think we have also been here. Castle on the Hill. George IV came to the throne. Britain was becoming increasingly powerful and the king wanted Windsor Castle to look more impressive, so he had a round tower and castle's walls raised and the gates made grander. This is the castle you see today, King of Bling. Inside the castle, George IV had rooms decorated with plenty of gold. People joked that if something moved, he would have it covered in gold. He spent a fortune of the best French furniture, priceless paintings and expensive objects. It's these works of art which help make the royal collection so important today. I think it's all a bit fleshy myself. George IV, this cup made from shell, silver and gold. A family home. Queen Victoria reigned 1837 to 1901. Proposed to Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha at Windsor in 1839. After they married, they decided to make the castle their main family home. The portrait shows Queen Victoria, Prince Albert, their eldest daughter, Princess Victoria, and their pet dogs. Windsor in winter. Victoria and Albert liked to spend Christmas and New Year at Windsor Castle with their children. The royal family often spoke in German to each other, and many of them Christmas traditions we have today came from Germany. You know that? Victoria and Albert invited important people to Windsor for sleepovers. What a treat! Or was it? Some guests complained that castle was freezing and so big that they got lost on the way back to their rooms. The royal train. The railway came to Windsor town in 1849 and the royal families were soon using it regularly. Queen Victoria insisted that the steam train should go on faster than 40 miles per hour during the day and 30 miles per hour at night. Meanwhile, the railway allowed more people to visit the castle. My horse goes faster than that train. Growing up at Windsor, Princess Elizabeth, now Queen Elizabeth II, and her younger sister Princess Margaret both grew up there and were educated at Windsor Castle. Windsor in wartime. During the Second World War, the young princess remained at the castles for safety. Their parents, King George VI, who reigned 1936 to 1952, and Queen Elizabeth stayed at Buckingham Palace during the wreck and returned to Windsor at weekends. Like ordinary homes, all the castle windows were fitted with the blackout blinds to make navigation of by enemy aircraft difficult at night. Basement rooms were converted into air raids shelters in the case the castle was bombed. Most precious jewel was hidden in a biscuit tin and stored in a tunnel beneath the castle. This will cheer things up. During the war, portraits in the Waterloo chamber were removed for safety, and the empty spaces filled with pictures of pantomimes figure painted by the young evacuee. They are still there, hidden behind the paintings. Fun at Christmas. It's a Christmas today, so it's Christmas things to talk about. Both the young princess loved acting and performed in plays and pantomimes in a temporary stage set up at the Waterloo Chamber. Children and teachers from the Royal School in Windsor took part in the productions. Over to you. Princess Elizabeth had two pet corgis and Doki and Jane. She and Princess Margaret also had three Labradors called Mimsy, Stiffy, and Scrummy. On the 18th birthday, Princess Elizabeth was given a corgi called Susan. All the corgis since bred by Queen are descended from Susan. One of the most popular attractions at Windsor Castle is the doll's house given to the Queen grandmother Queen Mary in 1924. It is the largest and most famous doll's house in the world, but it isn't a toy. All mod cons. Queen Mary loved collecting pretty things, especially miniature objects. She was presented with a fabulous doll's house made to show off the best of British craftsmanship. For it has electricity, hot and cold, running water to lift, and even flushing lavatories made to scale. Doll's house was designed by Sir Edwin Lutyens. He's a very famous guy. He also designed Parliament of India. You know that? This guy, Edwin Lutyens. A famous architect, well-known artists, designers, writers, composers, craftspeople and manufacturers worked together to fill it with everything a real king queen would need, but in a miniature. These bottles were filled with the real champagne and wine. A mouse with the real diamond eyes in queen's bedroom. Can you spot it? Even kings and queens need to wash their hands. Can you spot any tiny bar of soap? Mini jars were sweet tins of biscuits and boxes of the chocolates were made for dairy nursery. Working palace. Windsor Castle has over 1,000 rooms, more than 1 million tourists visit in every year, and it is home to more than 160 people. Managing it is an enormous task, of course. Castle control. In Norman times, a constable looked after the castle when the king or queen wasn't there. Today, constable, also called governor, still looks after the castle on behalf of the queens. During the Middle Ages, the castle was like hundreds of people living and working there. The most important people were ministries and churchmen who helped to run the country. Hundreds of servants, mostly boys and men, were responsible for the feeding everyone twice a day, and craftspeople such as blacksmiths, stonemasons, and carpenters looked after the building. Bridget Holmes. This is a Bridget Holmes who cleaned the royal bedchamber, laid fire, mopped floors, and emptied the necessaries chamber pots for James II, who reigned 1685 to 1688. Pictures of servants are very rare, and it may have been painted because she had served four kings: Charles I, Charles II, James II, and William III. Maybe because she was 96-year-old. She lived in the age of 100 years. She was 100 years and still cleaning. Wow, out of sight. Bridget was one of the army servants who did all the dirty tasks in 1700s. They were kept well out of sight of the noblemen and women who attached the kings and queens. Famous faces. Windsor Castle is one of the Queen four official homes where she welcomed kings, queens, and important guests from across the world. Garter Day. Every year, like Edward III, more than 600 years ago, the Queen leads Garter Nights, now ladies and of the Garter, to service St. George's Chapel and then to grand meal at St. George's Hall. The Queen is head of the order and chooses all the knights. Now the King Charles III do it. Just as Edward appointed his eldest son to the older order, so Queen has chosen her eldest son, Prince Charles. Other knights are members of the royal families, the people who will have played a big part in national life, such as past prime ministers. The Garter Star badge of the Knights of the Garter. Let's show it to everyone. Story guest. The Queen has welcomed many famous people to Windsor Castle, including the former President of the United States of America, Barack Obama, and his wife Michelle, the British astronaut Tim Peake, and actor Daniel Craig. Special events. Some other members of the royal family hold special events at Windsor Castle. Prince William hosted a charity gala at the castle to which guests such as Harry Potter star Emma Watson, model Kate Moss, and Cara Delevingne, and singer Emily Sand were invited. This is it. Thank you for listening to the queens in the castle at Windsor. See you again. Bye.
Bye.